In June 2024, Satnam Singh, an Indian farm labourer working in the Italian countryside near Rome, was left to die on the side of the road by the farm owner after an accident on the farm severed his arm. Rather than saving Satnam Singh's life, the farm owner was more worried about being caught using migrant labourers hired through the illegal recruitment system known as caporalato. Caporalato is a criminal network of gangmasters who recruit vulnerable workers, often migrants, for farming jobs and impose almost slave-like working conditions. In the case of Satnam Singh's employer, it turned out that he had already been under investigation for caporalato practices since 2019. The case of Satnam Singh shocked the country. It sparked wide media coverage, protests, and a swift government response, with Prime Minister Meloni stating that they were going to increase checks on farms and crack down on the caporalato system. It's kind of an open secret how bad working conditions are in the Italian agricultural sector, and how much organized crime, from traditional mafia organizations to newer networks of illegal exploitation, control large parts of the supply chain. You can find multiple articles and videos that go into depth into these aspects, so I'm not going to get into them. And while it's important to expose and crack down on farm labour exploitation and criminal organisations in Italy, obviously, this just isn't a problem that's specific to Italy. In fact, the exploitation of workers in the food system is widespread worldwide. Be it about Italy, Spain, Ireland, Thailand, there are always stories in the news about the terrible conditions that food and farm workers have to endure. However, while it's important to report on these cases and make the public aware of what is happening, the analysis never seems to go beyond exploitation bad. Why don't we ask, okay, so why does this keep happening? Who benefits from this system of exploitation beyond criminal organizations? Why is it that despite regulation, modern slavery laws, corporate social responsibility plans, we can't seem to crack down meaningfully on this phenomenon? So today, we're going to try and answer those questions and look at the structural aspects in the current food system that keep this exploitative system in place. Let's set the scene for how we've got the food system that we have. And to do so, we need to talk about the cultural and economic dominance of supermarkets, or, as the late Professor Jane Dixon coined, the supermarketisation of society. Basically, across the developed and industrialised world, the supermarket has become central to how food is produced, processed, priced, and consumed. The rise of supermarkets in the 1960s coincided with increased industrialization of the agricultural sector. So as agriculture was shifting towards becoming an industry focused on yield, market dynamics, and single commodity farming, so too were supermarkets after a reliable, affordable, and standardized supply of products for their increasing customer base. And as they grew, eating up competition and smaller shops that couldn't keep up with supermarkets' economies of scale and breadth of products, they could increasingly shape supply chains based on their needs, since they were the main buyers. For consumers, this has been extremely convenient. They gave us access to all the food that we want, reliably, safely, regardless of season or availability in our country. And it's not just food, they offer everything we need in one place, from petrol stations to dry cleaning and banking. Crucially, supermarkets have kept food prices low to retain customers. Great for consumers, but it's been disastrous for producers who have seen the value of their work and their output drop in recent decades. In fact, as supermarkets increase their control over food supply chains, the value of agriculture to national economies in the OECD has been declining relative to other sectors. The dominance of supermarkets in dictating how food supply chains work and what food is worth has only gotten worse in recent decades, thanks to mergers and acquisitions and cutthroat competition that have made grocery retail one of the most concentrated food sectors. Let's take a look. So while supermarketisation has created a buyer-driven food supply chain, the rapid increased concentration in the supermarket sector has given even more power to supermarkets to define the rules of the game. And what if producers refuse to play this game? Well, because there are lots of farms they can source from, supermarkets can simply choose to source from a different farm that will accept their conditions. And thanks to a globalized food system, they can also choose to source products from other countries, in a never-ending search for lower cost and higher quantities to maximize profits. This leaves producers in a difficult position. Because of increased concentration, not only are they only able to sell to a reduced number of buyers, but they are also under pressure to accept very low prices for their products, often selling at a lower price than production costs. Let's take a look at some of the consequences of concentration from Italy. First of all, An industry is usually deemed concentrated and not competitive when 4 firms or less control more than 40% of the market. By that definition, the Italian grocery retail sector is concentrated, and indeed retailers dictate the conditions to producers. An example of the power of this concentrated sector and the subsequent conditions producers have had to accept is the recently outlawed double-down auction system. Until 2021, Italian producers had to go through an online auction system to get their products accepted by supermarkets. The way this worked was that when the auction first opened, producers would bid to set the starting price, with the lowest priced winning. Then producers would bid again, lowering their offer against this already low starting price, basically a doubling down of the price to give supermarkets the lowest possible offer. This bidding system is now illegal, which is a great step in the right direction, but it hasn't fixed the industry much. Low prices and exploitation are still widespread. Because farm input costs, such as seeds, water, fertilizer, are not something farmers can cut much, often the area where they try to reduce cost is labor, which often leads to exploitation and slavery. Italian NGO Terra interviewed farmers and food business owners across the melon, salad, and pork industries for their report on worker exploitation in the northern Lombardy region. Consistently, they were told about how retailers impose lower and lower prices for their products, making them cover costs for promotions, threatening them to pull contracts if conditions weren't met, and imposing strict cosmetic standards that increased the percentage of products that could not be sold since they did not meet the requirements, further reducing farmer income. In such market conditions, business owners are always trying to find ways to cut costs, and often admitted to resorting to illegal hiring practices through gangmaster networks to reduce the cost of labor. Through this system, farm workers are not hired directly by the farm owners. Instead, they outsource the task to criminal gangmasters who cheaply organize groups of migrants to work on farms. This system is highly exploitative. The gangmasters deduct money from the workers' pay for anything from accommodation, water, food, transportation, charging their phone, hospital visits, while also confiscating their documents, so they are basically trapped. There are reports of labourers being paid €3 for working 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. Farm owners are aware of all of this, but turn a blind eye in order to make enough money to be profitable and keep their businesses going. I'm not going to say that supermarkets are evil and are directly responsible for all the exploitation that happens across food supply chains, but I would say that their business model, focused on paying the lowest price no matter the cost of labor or production, has created the perfect conditions for exploitative practices. And in the end, the entire supermarket business model relies on these practices to remain profitable and functional. In the context of Italy, Professor Fiammetta Fanizza has in fact claimed that the Italian grocery retailer's competitive edge relies on an endless supply of poorly paid workers. So basically the sector has indirectly accepted the help of criminal organizations that manage exploited farm workers to keep prices down and maintain profitability.
The secret ingredient is crime.
Going back to Satnam Singh, I hope that the business owner who left him to die is punished for his crimes. And I hope this tragedy leads to better checks on farms and punishments for those who exploit workers. But I know that this won't be the last tragic story about food workers in Italy, and I know that whenever a similar event happens in a different country, it will generate the same reactions and headlines, but the elephant in the room will not be addressed, and that is that big food corporations and their business models that shape our food system have helped create this system of low prices, low wages, and poor working conditions for the sake of their profit. This critique doesn't just apply to supermarkets, by the way. The devaluing of agriculture is widespread across the industry, and the supermarket business model has been adopted by other players in the food industry, such as food processors and manufacturers, who when buying from farmers, by default expect them to accept low prices for their crop and their labour. If we really want to stop worker exploitation, we don't just need tough laws and checks, but we need to address the unchecked power that food corporations have on the food system. We need to address the fact that the exploitation of farmers and farm workers is in part driven by their imposition of unreasonable standards and low prices. So what do we need the food industry to do? We need them to adopt fairer pricing and buying policies and ensuring that human rights, living wages, and high labor standards are implemented in their supply chains. Having ambitious corporate social responsibility strategies won't do much if this isn't accompanied by meaningful commitments to pay fairer prices for the food that they buy. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe and let me know your thoughts in the comments. See you next time.